Matt.
I love the beat of the opening thing. Bomb, bomb, bomb.
Same. I was over here dancing. I was ready to keep it going.
Good to see you.
Good to see you right back. Oh, good morning and good afternoon.
Yeah, as most of you don't know, I'm tuning in from St. Louis, Missouri, so Central Time, 11:30, and my dear friend here, Ellie, is coming in live from London at 5:30 p.m.
5:30 p.m. Ellie and Matt worldwide. Matt, I'm gonna be so honest with you. Whenever I hop on a call with you, I mean virtually, because we haven't even gotten to meet in person yet, which I'm really waiting for. But whenever I hop on a call with you, you got energy. Like you give me an energy, and it's always a very positive energy. And I'm grateful for it.
Number one, thank you. Number two, I realized I'm still drinking coffee this morning, so at 11:30 in the late morning. And three, right back at you. I love not only our relationship, but our family of room tilters, and we're just blessed. And so I love the consistency that we continue to show up every day during this time. And so those of you tuning in, we just love the participation, and we're trying to model what we try to preach as coaches and room tilters, which is consistency. So it's awesome to have some time with you. And I was just Googling Charlton athletic gear. So
you don't need to Google it. Let me send you some.
Now we're talking.
The next live, we're going to be decked out, everyone. Charlton.
There we go. So those of you tuning in, Ellie's taking the lead here today. We have an exciting topic that we have seen give such great results when it comes to organizations that we work with. So Ellie, start us off.
Okay, so I was thinking about this, and we were kind of talking about this, Matt. So I, most of the time, am working in a professional sporting environment, and I get to watch, coaches and players lead all of the time. And so I'm in the room when training sessions or practices are being put together. And something that I noticed that is really important in sport, and I think it's massively important in businesses and corporations and any part of a team or any type of team, and that is creativity. So how are leaders instilling and like creating a space for creativity? That is what we're going to talk about today. So I question back to you, Matt, and something that we can kind of brainstorm and collaborate on. Why is creativity important as part of a team and for performance? What do we think?
And when we started talking about this, it's interesting how we start talking about it and then it just starts showing up, right? Kind of like you just manifest it. And as I shared with you, last week, we purposely in our agenda left some space for just exactly this, right? Creativity. And it was like our best meeting and our best call ever, because I think those of you tuning in, especially in the workplace, we get so tight to our agenda. We're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And then by the end, that's where we usually schedule the creativity. Hey, anything else for the good of the order? And then everyone's like, no, I'm exhausted and the meeting's run late and no way am I going to mention one more thing because we're going to be in here for it. So like everybody's like, no, and then we leave, right? And so where am I seeing it the most is, less is more, keeping the agenda, having some space in there built in, whether it be on the corporate side or, even in our personal lives. So how about you?
Yeah. I mean, I think you're completely right. Like I'm somebody who likes structure, and I think we live in a world of structure. And I noticed that a lot more during COVID. It was just like, okay, how do I fill my calendar? How do I get everything booked in and get all this structure, right? And so by the time the day is over, maybe I've completed a lot of tasks, or I've been on all those calls that I was supposed to be on, but not very often do I have time for creativity and letting my brain just wander. And I think we've gotten very used to keeping our brains occupied. Not very often am I just like sitting alone in my thoughts. And if I'm sitting alone, usually maybe I'm like scrolling through my phone or I'm talking and I'm in a conversation. There's not a lot of room for creativity naturally. And I think that's a big piece of thriving teams and performance, that we're missing out on. Because I think if we can have creativity, that is where we can innovate, we can evolve, and we can do it quickly, and we can do it together. And I think oftentimes we can kind of surprise ourselves on where we can take that. So creativity for me is massive, and it's related to performance. They go hand in hand.
Love it. And as a coach, I'm always listening for, and what's the next right step in that. And as you were talking personally, I'm thinking about one of the things that I try to do that I help people do the most is time block their day, right? We know setting intentions throughout our day is more apt to increase our odds that those are going to happen. And what I realized early on was people are like, hey, I'm too scheduled. And I was like, oh, you're exactly right. Where are we building in some space in our day to allow ourselves to just sit in that space and see what comes to us? And so I think you're right. It's we're not used to that. And then on the professional side, as I mentioned, those of you tuning in, next time our team is together, where are we purposefully just giving some time with no agenda and seeing what comes of that? And then the power of, as we know, synergy. You put two people in the room, 1 + 1 = 10, 20, whatever it may be, because you have your way, my way, and then the better way or a new way or whatever that looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's that loose structure, and it's giving space for creativity. I think that being intentional, we have to be intentional. If we're not, that space gets eaten up. It does all the time. So it's being intentional. We now, scheduling is king. And so scheduling time for creativity is important. We see that in the sporting environment where coaches are putting together technical tactical sessions, and they're like, okay, during this amount of time we have to get this idea across. We need to be preparing like this for the match that's coming this next weekend or whatever it is. But then there are times allotted to just let the players play. And I think the equivalent of that is just letting your brain wander, seeing where it goes. Maybe present the topic, the idea, the question, the problem. Give yourself a starting point, but don't try and map out the end or the outcome. Just see where it takes you, especially as a group. See where it takes you.
I love it. The Basketball Hall of Fame was just on last week or a couple weeks ago, and I caught Popovich as one of the main coaches, and he was talking about one of his players, and he basically was like, yeah, I just learned to shut up, and I was overcoaching, and I was doing too much, and just let him play. And I think, again, talking personally or athletically or just, Matt Miller's opinion, like, we are overcoaching. We are trying to overlead in our organizations, and we're not creating what I think is an important topic we're talking about today, which is this balance of scheduling and creativity, and this balance of, whether that be pressure and support, whatever these balances are, we're always trying to lead in, being courageous and considerate, like this scheduling, but also allowing time for creativity. It is such an important topic.
So, and you just mentioned something that I really want to highlight, because I see this a lot, which is coaches, they see so much, and oftentimes they know what they're looking for, what they're asking for, but then they end up over communicating and trying to just get this point across. So they're talking and they're talking and they're talking, or they're trying to direct, they're trying to control, they're trying to manage. And what that does is it prevents people from thinking for themselves. It kind of cuts off those lines of creativity, and it creates a type of dependency that you actually probably don't want from your team. So I think that's a really, really important point when it comes to leaders, when it comes to coaches, is being mindful of overcoaching and being intentional about those words that you're using. Ask a lot of questions and then let the group take it from there.
Right. And I'm going to put this in the chat, but you just reminded me of the quote that says, you can't hold people accountable for results and supervise their actions. So let's get clear. Let's get clear on what the end in mind is. What's the goal? What are we trying to accomplish? But then I'm not going to micromanage you. And again, the magic word today, creativity. Let me get there the way I want to. I'm coming to you live from my home right now. Upstairs are 3 bedrooms, and one of those is my kid. And I'm going to use a personal example. The end in mind, clean room. How you get there, I'm not going to manage, right? But like, we have some expectation. And I know that's a very simple example, but it's like, just set the expectation, whatever that may be, but then allow the creativity on how to get there. And again, I shared with you, August, I'm in schools and in a lot of schools. And what we talk about is that power of creativity and how bringing people together, and just, you never know what's going to happen, but allow people the space. And that's, in education, one of the things we give is a common assessment. The teachers kind of give the same test. Well, why do we give that test? To see who's doing well and who's not. And so when Ellie's kids do really well, it's like, Ellie, what are you doing differently than I'm doing? And then whatever we hear from you, we start doing more of, right? And so it's that we need that space of learning from others more than anything.
And okay, so we need the space learning. Hold on, before I even go into that, I have to repeat the quote that you just gave, which I think you need to post later.
I'm gonna put it in the chat.
I think I wrote it. You can't hold people accountable for results and supervise their actions. Is that right?
Yep, exactly. You can't hold people accountable for results and then supervise their actions. It's like, let's get real clear on the end in mind, but then how we get there, I have some flexibility, right? Because let's be honest, everyone tuning in, the second we've all felt that micromanage, and it's like, whoa, now I feel I'm just doing it for you instead of doing it for the end in mind. That makes sense. And that's where I think, and again, I'm going to use the school example because I've been in schools for the last couple of weeks. When kids think that they're doing it for the teacher, they have the wrong end in mind.
Right.
Versus doing it for the learning.
And I think that's where our leader can step in and be the one that reinforces that, be the one that makes that clear, that this is the process, this is the why, this is the reason, or this is what we're looking to accomplish. That so I have a question for you, because this is something that I have seen sometimes where we try and create this space to encourage creativity, to encourage collaboration, brainstorming, whatever it might be. But sometimes voices get lost because sometimes we've got people who want to speak up, and oftentimes those are the same people that end up speaking up, and voices get drowned out, or people don't always feel comfortable being able to speak and being involved in that space of creativity. But I think sometimes those are people that end up having incredible ideas or thought processes. So what are your thoughts on that? And do you have any ideas or techniques or platforms that you use to kind of help bring those voices out or give those people a voice when it comes to the contributing to creativity?
So, I come from the 7 habits world of highly effective people. And one of the things we teach in habit 4 is think, win, win. And the piece there is the balance between courage and consideration. And I think if you talk to the average person that you grabbed on the street and said, hey, talk to me about a highly mature person, they'd be like, well, they speak their mind and they're courageous and they, and so forth. Well, the definition of courage is speaking your thoughts and feelings respectfully. But then ironically, the definition of consideration is the same thing, is listening respectfully. And then we have to have that balance. And so to your point, you hit it on the head. When we get in a group setting, what happens? The courageous people are the first to talk too long. The considerate people are sitting there and either run out of time or there's not enough trust and so forth in the room, so I don't share. And those are the people we usually need to hear from the most. And so going to what is a system we can put in place, leaders that are tuning in, whatever that may be, what's a system of support that we have in place where everyone gets their turn? Now, we could spend a session on unpacking people rating themselves. Are you more highly courageous or more highly considerate? And then understanding who in the room is more courageous and more considerate, which then leads to, we need you being more considerate or more courageous, right? So just an awareness of our strengths and so forth. But then the
Right.
second piece is, I think the most importantly, is a system. So I'm going to go back to schools. What do we do in the classroom? We circle up with the kids. We might have a little spongy ball and we start passing it to the right, and Ellie gets to speak first. Now, Ellie can speak or she can pass the ball, right?
Yeah.
Now, that's a very elementary system that puts in place. But as we go around the circle, everyone had their chance to either say something or to pass, right? And again,
Yeah.
if I'm that highly considerate person, it might be a couple times before I pass or before I actually speak, right? But at some point, the system will allow the space, kind of like what we're talking about today, creativity and space, will allow me finally the space to be like, I have something to share, right?
Yeah.
How about you? What comes to mind?
Um, I think about it from a, I guess more, yeah, no, I think about it a lot of times with a team perspective when it comes to sport, because we have team meetings quite constantly where we're sitting down and we want to get people's opinions on what they see, because we understand they've got completely different perspectives as to where they are on the field, their personalities, the people that they're interacting with. And so we want people's voices to be heard, but sometimes we struggle with the big characters. Well, they're confident and they're courageous and they can speak, and those considerate ones that are a little bit more quiet don't always speak. And so if I think about like things that we've tried, partner conversations or small groups where there's an opportunity to speak and not fear judgment or not fear that you're speaking, to everybody on the team, and then coming back and saying, does anybody have anything to share? Did you hear something from one of the people in your group that you think was great that you want to share in their behalf? Um, that can be in partners or small groups. If I think about it virtually, there's all kinds of like brainstorming clouds and collaboration platform. I know Andy, I've seen him do this very well. He uses Menti. Have you used Menti
Yeah,
before?
I haven't,
So
but I've seen Andy use it.
I've used it actually with the team that I work with, and they really liked it because then their thoughts were kind of kept anonymous. Everything popped up on the screen, so everybody got a voice, and then we could kind of dissect it and expand on it as a group. So I basically I try and think about, for those people who maybe are highly considerate and not always courageous, what ways can I tap in to get them to engage while also, getting them slightly out of their comfort zone? Um, so those are a couple ways.
So two things that came to mind. And again, what Ellie and I are practicing here a little bit is this play off of each other and the creativity that comes from it. And let's be full disclosure, in these lives, the end in mind as we started these was to have a topic, but then truly to have some space, knowing
Mhm.
how talented our team is, to allow this to take place. And so those of you tuning in, we're modeling exactly that, is the play off of each other and the synergy that happens when a couple people get in the room, let alone when you have even more. And as you were talking, it reminded me of two things. It's critical that we open up this space and creativity because quiet organizations are dangerous. If we have people that don't feel like they can share, the lack of growth and everything else that's going to happen, like that's a
Yeah.
dangerous piece. And it reminds me that no matter what your title in the organization, you're a leader, and you can help in this capacity by seeing the people that are either, we're kind of targeting highly considerate people, right?
Right.
That they can help the organization as well. And I think too many times we look at the manager or the CEO or the captain or, the coach, and it's like one person can't do it for the whole organization. It takes all of us helping. And so this person that we know isn't sharing as much, who is closest to that person that has the relationship and trust to be
Right.
like, hey, that last topic we were talking about, I know you have something good to share because you're really good at it, right? And so the strategy I always used is knowing, everyone comes to the table with a strength. Everybody's great at something. And so the
Mhm.
more we can have that topic on the schedule for the day, and then be like, I'm not really good at calling people out, but like setting them up ahead of time to be like, hey, Ellie, tomorrow at our team meeting, we have this topic. I would love for you to share what you do because you're so good at it. Boom.
Mhm.
Now I've been proactive. I've
Yeah.
got ahead of the schedule of what it is. I've put them in a successful spot to be like, hey, I've created this safe space for you. And now we
Yeah.
get to learn from that person, like we talked about today, that opens that up. And so,
So I completely agree with what you're saying, and I like that, and I appreciate that you're calling us out as an example. We had a general structure, but we do it quite intentionally, I think, as we let this conversation go where it's going to go, because oftentimes when it's too structured, it ends up not really being that genuine, and it's harder to convey a message because we're trying to stick to that plan so much so that we don't allow ourselves to think of anything else. So I think that works quite well for us, and it's living proof that we're here modeling what we're trying to help everybody else.
well, and
Uh,
what happens with the plant? Like early on, I know some of the calls we would have like, here's the 4 things we're going to talk about. Well, creativity happened in the first couple, and then it's like, oh, we got to get to 3 and 4 because we're
right.
running time, and
Five
it's
5 minutes.
11:52, right? And so part of
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, let's not plan for 4, let's plan for
yeah.
2 or maybe 3.
Yeah. I wanna go back to what you were saying because I had a thought about it, and it was, like, as a leader, so let's say we give someone the opportunity, especially if we're using the example of somebody who is a little bit more considerate and not courageous. So we ask, "Would you mind sharing that with the group, or do you mind if I share this on your behalf? Because I think this is such a great idea." I think it's the idea of, or the concept of positive reinforcement. When you see people contribute to a conversation who don't normally do that are on your team, give them praise and recognition for having the courage to speak their truth, to speak their voice, and to be contributing to the conversation. Create an environment where that is not only accepted but it's encouraged.
Yep.
So that
And
yeah, yeah.
and just
Oh,
having the courage, I was just leading a team 2 weeks ago on this topic. It was no secret, and there was 8 of us in the room, and the 7 were a team. I was the coach. It was no secret who was the most courageous in the room and who was more considerate. Like everybody knew, right? But just broaching the topic and being able to rate themselves, and luckily everybody rated themselves, on a scale of 100, where you at? And the courageous people were 80-20 when it came to the balance of courage and consideration, so forth. But then it's honestly just having that conversation of, okay, what are we going to do about that? And, include those people. So I think just having the courage to talk about that and to ensure we have systems in place where everybody's getting to share. And like
mm,
to your point, you hit it on the head. Those that aren't sharing have some of the best ideas. And so again, going back to the classroom, we're not calling on people that are raising their hand all the time. We have to have a system in place that allows everybody the opportunity to share.
absolutely. That is powerful, and I think the willingness to create those spaces and have those conversations, it's like I read something earlier. I think Simon Sinek had shared it, but he was talking about difficult conversations and how the goal is not to keep the peace. The goal is to have those difficult conversations because it's an act of service. It's an act of service out of love for the other person. And I think that is the type of environment that we are trying to create. So we want to be able to have an environment where we can say, hey, there are certain people that are doing a lot of the talking, which is great, but we need to find a way for everybody to have a voice. Let's just address that. Let's just bring
Yeah.
that up and have an open conversation about it because it doesn't need to be uh, something that we don't have a conversation about. Why not?
And what's awesome is if done right, the highly courageous or people finally are like, yeah, I need to shut up. And it's no, like we need to hear from them. It's actually
Yeah.
a strength that they're modeling,
Yep.
and they can help. That's one of the best sessions is, okay, well, how can the considerate people be more courageous? Well, courageous people have those ideas, right? They can share that. And then vice versa. The considerate people can be like, yeah, listen, stop talking, seek first to understand. Like, it's a very simple process. But then I turn my personal hat on, or those of you tuning in, your closest team that you work with, If we're not having those courageous conversations, we are wasting so much time, because what do? We don't have the conversation. Then we go off by ourselves. Our inner dialogue starts to take over. It always goes to the negative or makes stuff up. Now we're spending all this time with ourselves, making stuff up, making it the issue worse. And as you and I know, in the coaching field, the best advice we can say is go talk to the person. And 95% of the time, if we can just get that topic out and be courageous enough to talk about it, it solves itself. You know, and now we've saved all this time of worrying and all this, space. And we talk about that a lot, right? Inner dialogue. If you don't have a plan every single day for when that shows up, and that's number one.
Absolutely. Okay. I'm going to try and summarize the last part of what you just said, because I think not having those difficult conversations is essentially like a creativity blocker on teams. And I think as like what leaders can do if they're trying to cultivate and trying to inspire creative teams, they have to be able to recognize the blockers in terms of what things do we need to have conversations about as a group that are stopping us from being creative. What type of environment am I creating by the way I carry myself as a leader? Like, am I creating a fear-based culture? Am I creating one that's empowering people around me to have a voice and admit their mistakes and things like that? What are the relationship dynamics? Is there a relationship that's kind of struggling that as a leader, I might need to kind of help push in the right direction, or at least address, because it's a creativity blocker in the room. It's affecting the dynamic. So we have to try and detect those creativity blockers as leaders.
I love that. And as I think about, I don't even know if we call this Workplace Wednesday anymore, but as I think of the workplace, like literally next time the team is together. So, I always, with a minute and a half on the clock, I always think we have not done our due diligence if people tuning in and people tuning in later don't leave with the next right step. And so my recommendation on a next right step would be the next time you are with your team, whoever that looks like, virtually, in person, on the athletic field, go Charlton Athletic, that we do a quick conversation. And it can be the most simple too. We talk about do simple better at Limitless Minds, right? It's about putting a little plus delta chart together and be like, okay, topic, creativity. What do we do well as a team? Okay, deltas. Where can we improve? And just having that conversation is creative. Might not even have been on the agenda. It's going to be the thing we're going to start with, right? But then that actually models who shares right away, who doesn't. Like it's going to help us just see that play out. And so I think leaving today, I love what you said about blockers. Let's have an honest conversation. Where are we doing well? Where does creativity show up well in our organizations, our team? And how can we get better when it comes to that?
That's an incredible takeaway. Thank you for sharing that, Matt. Honestly, I think if you can have that conversation and that type of brainstorming session with your team, that is the best start to go from where you are now to one step in the right direction. Next right step right there towards empowering and instilling a creative team. So
love it.
Matt, thank you for the brainstorming on here. We are creative together.
And I see at the, so is it 6 p.m. Your time right now?
6 p.m. my time, correct.
6 p.m. straight up. And our friend Mari just reminded us that tomorrow, tune in to our great teammates, Carla, Iris, as they tune in on Thursday. So Ellie, I'll let you wrap us up.
Okay. Well, massive thank you to everybody who joined in. I think everybody in their own right is a leader. So whether that's inspiring creativity within yourself personally or having the opportunity to do that within a team, hopefully you feel that you've got some tools and skills that you can take away, things to be aware of, and a next right step, which involves having an honest conversation with your team, doing a little breakdown on creativity in and of itself. So thank you for taking the time. Matt, you're incredible. You're inspirational. Love your energy.
You Fists. Let's go.
Thank you, everybody who joined in. We will catch you later. Have an amazing rest of your day.